Hey guys, it's Faye from SolarFlow and I am back with a new video. Today's topic is a deep dive behind the veil energy read on O.J. Simpson and Nicole Brown Simpson. So if this sounds like an interesting topic to you, please stick around, and if not, I will catch you at another video. Before we get started, I'd just like to request anyone who watches this video, if you enjoy it, if you could please click the like button down below. And if you'd like to receive more interesting content such as this, I'm currently on my true crime kick right now. But if you want to be receiving any information on things that are behind the veil, not just what we see with our three-dimensional eyes, this is the place for you. I would be delighted if you could subscribe. Now, with that in mind, we are going to dive right in. So for anyone who is not familiar or just wants to kind of brush up on this topic, O.J. Simpson he's still alive, but at the time that this happened, he was a well-known sports figure. He was a football player. He was a Heisman Trophy winner, and he was married to Nicole Brown from 1985 until 1992. And in 1994, she was killed along with another individual that was on the property out of her home, a friend named Ron. They were both killed in 1994. And there has been a lot of speculation regarding if it was OJ that actually had done the killing, even though he was actually acquitted in, I believe, 1996. So we're going to explore all of these different topics and peel back the layers of the dynamic between these two, both OJ's energy, Nicole's energy, the energy that led to the crime as well. Okay? So let's go right into this. So first and foremost, the way OJ's energy came in is one like an overindulged, spoiled child. He was not used to hearing the words no. And while he probably had a level of determination and personal accountability that went into him becoming a well-known football player, he did not have any level of personal accountability at home. And when there is no sense of that, when there is no sense of healthy boundaries that are implemented in the formative years of somebody growing up, it's really a foreign concept to them, especially if they go on to have a personality disorder, which, of course, I'm not a doctor. I cannot diagnose OJ as having, but I would say there's probably some level of that in play here. Now, again, he grew up with no real boundaries, no sense of accountability, and did not like being told no. He also didn't like people touching his stuff. He didn't like people playing with his stuff. He very much saw Nicole as his stuff. She belonged to him. And he did not understand that even after she had divorced him and she had made attempts to move on with his life, that there was this level of expectation that when you get divorced from somebody, you are free to live your life. But according to OJ, that was not the case. This was someone who belonged to him. She was his stuff. Now, this was further exhibited because a number of years after he was actually acquitted, he had gone to Las Vegas where there was a sports collector who had acquired a number of his things legally through legal channels. But he was not satisfied with that. He wanted his stuff back. And he went to, I believe it was the office of this sports collector, and he actually held him hostage with a firearm because this guy had his stuff. Just stuff. And he was mad about it because it's his stuff. So this is really somebody that's, one could even say, a little bit childish and a little bit petty about material possessions, number one, and just this idea of like boundaries being completely foreign to him. It's very much the way you would actually look at like a 2-year-old who's playing on the playground and they're just going to go and take a toy from somebody else that's on the playground, not understanding that's somebody else's toy. That is very much the way OJ is. He is still this way as well. Now, so yes, on a base fundamental level, he didn't understand the idea of boundaries, and that Nicole had this expectation of being left alone shortly after they were divorced. Now, what actually did bring these two together was that she fell in love with the charismatic version of O.J. Simpson. Okay? He was well known, he was popular, he was very, very charming. And when he turned on the charm, he could very much seduce any woman that he wanted. Now, Nicole did look the other way with a number of red flags that actually came up during their courtship. But she kind of explained it away with this thought that this came with the territory of being with somebody like an O.J. Simpson. So, yes, he was controlling early on. Yes, he was prone to outbursts. He could have a temper. But she just thought this is somebody that is used to getting what he wants. He's used to getting his way. He's used to being popular. And it came with the territory of being with somebody like an O.J. Simpson. So she definitely did look the other way early on. But I'm also going to say that at that time, there was not a lot of awareness or education around what comprises a healthy relationship. And I feel like it's much more a part of the general social awareness now, on some sort of a level. But back then in the 1980s, first of all, before there was even like the internet, now if you think you're in an unhealthy relationship, you could like Google what's going on and you'll find out like exactly what it could potentially be. Back then, there was no Google. Back then, there was no internet. Back then, if you want to look at it, people were kind of like navigating interpersonal relationships a lot more blindly. And especially when you're dealing with somebody that's a celebrity, even more so. There's no understanding in how to kind of like navigate these very sensitive topics. And people were on their own. And especially when it's somebody that's a celebrity and somebody that's used to getting what they want, when they are dating a non-celebrity, there is, I believe, a lot more of this hands-off approach to them because of their status as well. So anytime you have an imbalance of social status, things like this can tend to come up. Not that they will always come up, not that they don't come up when there is a balance of social standing as well, just to say that it's much more prevalent when there's this unbalance of social standing. And that is very much what was happening here. So yes, she fell in love with the charismatic version of him. He also knew how to turn it on specifically for Nicole, which was that she never felt like she belonged growing up. And he was possessive of her. And again, without her understanding that that's a potential red flag, she liked kind of this idea of what it felt like to belong to somebody. In addition to that, when they would go out, he was used to having people fawning all over him. He was used to like going to a restaurant where they all knew who he was. And people would come up to him and talk to him. And when he would take her out, he really knew how to like tune the entire external world out and just give all of his attention to her, because that's what she needed. She needed the validation that even though she was going with somebody like O.J. Simpson, that he was giving his attention to her. So that is very much what was the early energetic blueprint of their relationship. Now, so yep, just going to review. He did not grow up with a level of personal accountability. There was a lot of leniency in his home, and he did not understand the concept of boundaries, and he did not like people touching his stuff. Okay, now let's see how that's going to start to unfold. Now, because he didn't understand the concept of boundaries and he didn't like being told no, he could actually become boorish and a bully when he didn't get what he wanted. And this is again because he was so used to getting what he wanted. He was so used to being this popular guy and this charismatic guy that everybody loved, that when he didn't get what he wanted, he actually could turn and people would see a different side of him. But what happens is the person that they are living with, the person that is actually closest to them, they will start to see it first and foremost, because there's only so long that somebody like this can keep a facade up. So the cracks can begin to appear. And for Nicole, when he would go into these fits of being boorish and being a bully, it was just easier for her to acquiesce and give in to him, because he would literally like just badger her to the point of complete like near insanity just by his behavior, just by acting like this child who wanted his favorite toy, but it was in the dishwasher, it was in the washing machine being washed, and like all hell would break loose when he didn't get what he would wanted. So it was just easier for her to acquiesce. And this is going to continually lay the groundwork in this very unhealthy dynamic between the two of them. Now, he was, again, because he was boorish and he could be a bully, and because the initial groundwork that came into play between these two, the initial dynamic, was one in which he was very early on a bit controlling, and he could lose his temper. That would sometimes even resort to physical violence. And even after they had had children, they had 2 children, he continued to be physically violent with her. And she, at some point, decided that she had enough, because she realized what she thought she was getting, which was this very charismatic person who could give all of his devotion and attention onto her, and a place where she felt she belonged. Now she understood that sense of belonging was actually, oh, I am an actual belonging of his. She wanted to be her own person. She wanted to be her own sentient person. She didn't want to be a belonging of a child basically trapped in a man's body. Now, she was energetically, after they got divorced and she was starting to move on, energetically, OJ could really feel that as well. He could feel that she was starting to pull away from him energetically. So he was used to, even after they had separated, pulling antics that would get her attention. And for Nicole, whatever that may have been, that could have been scaring her, or that could have been being a bully, or that could have been calling her and just yelling at her. Whatever it was that would cause her to feel emotionally dysregulated, he very much knew what to do and how to pull her chain, so to speak, to get her to react. And she was growing up and she was growing tired. And I kind of love the way that this actually came in. She was growing tired of OJ always being the center of her solar system. So as the celebrity, as this football player, as this overgrown child, he was very much used to being the sun, the personal point of attention for everybody whose life that he was in. He didn't really see people as having their own life. He saw people as being kind of like supporting actors in his own personal role. And at the point that Nicole was starting to pull away and she was saying energetically, hey, this is just nonsense. This is stupid. I don't want this anymore. I want to be my own personal point of attraction. I want to be my own personal sun. And she wanted to stop giving the attention to him. This enraged OJ big time. Because again, he was used to knowing what to do to pull her chains, to getting her to respond, even after they were divorced. And when his usual antics were no longer working, this got him really, really angry. This was not acceptable to OJ. And what I was actually shown at this point was that he began to stalk her. It started off being like low level. It started off being like he would just drive through her neighborhood. He would drive past her house. Then it started like where he would drive past and he would call her and he would tell her, he would let her know, I'm driving past your house right now. He wanted to let her know that she was not out of his reach or out of his grasp, or that she was ever going to be fully safe from him. Now, on the night of the killing, because yeah, we're getting there. So what was shown to me was that because he was used to doing this like low-level stalking, one could say, he was very much comfortable and used to driving into her neighborhood and then sliding out of there without being detected. So he knew the way to go, he knew the route to go. He was so used to it and he was so comfortable to slip in and out of that neighborhood without being detected. Now, on the night of her actual killing, what had happened there was that he knew that he was going out of town. But stalking her became almost like an addiction for him. He needed his fix before he went out of town. And he had gone over there that night and he had driven past her place. And there was something that was going on that was a different point of attraction for him that actually caused the murder to go on. So I'm not going to say that this was done in murder in the first degree. I'm going to say that this was probably more like murder in the second degree. He didn't go over here with the intention of killing her or killing Ron Smith. But when he had actually gotten there and he saw Ron, this is what happened. So seeing Ron there had threatened his sense of masculinity and virility, and he snapped. He had gone into a complete frenzy, and it was a case of overkill. Overkill is not like where you stab somebody 1 time, 3 times, however many times until they're actually mortally wounded. It was a case where, almost like a shark in the water getting the scent of blood and how that will drive them into a frenzy, he was drove into a complete frenzy that night. It was a complete case of overkill. And that, because my notes are not necessarily linear in this case, let me find what happened next. Okay, so seeing Ron that night had triggered him, okay? And we're going to talk a little bit about what specifically about Ron Smith had actually triggered him. I think, was his name Ron Smith? I actually think I got his name wrong. Was it Ron Goldman? I think it was Ron Goldman. It's so typical of me to like ruin people's names. Sorry about that, guys. Because I just wrote Ron and I was going off of like my memory from the trial back then, but it's just so typical. Okay. So seeing Ron, was it Ron Goldman? Ron Smith Goldman? Ron Goldman? Whatever. Okay, just Ron. Seeing Ron that night had triggered something inside of OJ. And this is what I saw. Ron was everything that he was not, okay? And I'm not going to list everything. I'm just going to list like the most prevalent things that triggered OJ that night, okay? So Ron was, and again, this is not like consciously. It's not like OJ was looking at Ron and he somehow consciously knew these things. This was very much a subconscious energetic exchange that was going on between these two. So imagine it like where 2 dogs meet each other in the park for the first time. They go and they kind of like sniff each other's butts, and that tells them like everything they need to know about a dog, apparently. This is kind of like an energetic sniffing of butts, if you will, between 2 dogs, okay? And Ron was empathic, caring, masculine. He would have made one hell of an unbelievable father. So he was all of the traits that OJ had, but without any of the actual toxic components to it. So he was masculine without being overly masculine. He was caring without being possessive. He was empathic without it being false empathy or cognitive empathy. He actually had the real goods, whereas OJ didn't actually have the real goods. Ron was also a protector and a nurturer. So the reason that he was actually over there that night was because that night Nicole Brown had gone out to eat at a restaurant that Ron was a waiter in, and her mom had left, Nicole's mom had left her glasses in the restaurant. And Nicole was a regular in the restaurant, so she had called up the restaurant and let them know she had left, the mom had left the glasses there, and Ron had actually, I believe, volunteered to bring them over to Nicole's house that night. Because he was a kind, genuinely kind person, kind and caring person, and that's what he did. So for him, it was very much being in the wrong place at the wrong time, but we can also say, because we now understand, especially if you've been watching a lot of my other videos, that there is no such thing as being in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's a 3-dimensional concept. What it actually is a soul contract prior to a person's incarnation to having these major life lessons being played out for them. So Ron, for whatever reason, had agreed on a soul contractual level to be in this place, in this time. Even if it wouldn't have been this night, it probably would have been a different night where this all would have played out, because this was these 3 souls' karma brought together, being worked out in a three-dimensional way. It just looks very three-dimensional without the understanding of what's going on behind the actual veil. Okay, so he, again, OJ recognized on a soul level the essential goodness in Ron. Now, when being confronted with the actual goodness in Ron, that made OJ feel incredibly uncomfortable. And again, this is on a soul level. This is on an energetic level. This is not like a conscious feeling in OJ's mind where, oh my God, here's this great guy, I have to kill him. It doesn't work that way. So energetically, he felt that he had to kill Ron, and he needed to eliminate the energetic goodness in Ron, and he needed to drive out that light that was in the world because it triggered in OJ a soul recognition of his own internal darkness. So one could say that, and I know this happens with a number of my clients because this has come up in our sessions, that they are holding a mirror, but the mirror that they're holding up is not facing them. It's not facing the light being. It is actually facing the other dark entities that are around them. So that way, when the other dark entities come in contact with them, all that is being reflected back to them is their own darkness, their own dark internal state. And in their effort to quell the uncomfortable feeling that causes inside of them, it will actually lead to them destroying the mirror because they don't like the reflection of what they're being shown. So, for example, if anybody has been in a relationship with somebody like this, you will understand that what was being done to you was in effort to destroy their own personal reflection because it triggered this uncomfortable feeling inside of them. They don't like that uncomfortable feeling. They want to live in the denial of their inherent darkness. And when you hold up a mirror to them, that will trigger them. And that is what is going on here. That is what actually happened here, because this is not present day. So Ron, being the essential good person that he was, held up an energetic mirror for OJ to see himself, to see his darkness, which caused him to feel very, very uncomfortable with it. And he needed to destroy the lightness that was in Ron and to destroy the mirror that Ron was so that OJ would no longer feel uncomfortable within himself by being confronted with his own internal dark state. So killing Ron was the only way that he could escape that feeling. Now, OJ also lacked complete emotional empathy. And if you want to also think about this, there was no cause for concern on his part that it could be his children that were sleeping upstairs in their mother's home that would come down in the morning and would actually discover their mother's body. They are dead. So this is he's a dark character. He had absolutely no emotional empathy for what the fallout of this was going to be. All he thought about after the murder was his own sense of survival and that he knew he needed to get out of there. Now, one could say fortunate for him, or at least in his mind fortunate for him, he actually had a plane to catch that night. He was going out of town, and when he got on the plane, he thought he was actually home free. He really, really thought he got away with murder at that point, and he probably kind of did in the long run, one could say. Not on a soul level, but in the three-dimensional level, he did, because he was actually acquitted of it. So now, here's another very interesting thing that came through. So his inherent arrogance, which comes up again, and I'll talk about that, his inherent arrogance led him to believe that he would actually get away with this, just as he had always gotten away with things in the past. Again, not growing up with a sense of accountability in the home, where he could kind of push people around and bully him to getting what he wanted. So he thought this was just going to be another example of him getting what he wanted. And even prior to this happening, Nicole had actually called the police on a number of occasions. And she had actually reported that he was beating her. But, then the police would come over and OJ would just like turn on the charm and, oh, he's the juice. And then the police like would want to take a picture with the juice. So he was very, very comfortable with this idea that he would continue to get away with things because he had been getting away with them all along, even in reference to the violence that had been perpetrated against Nicole. Now, something very interesting that also came through, which anyone who remembers this will remember, that there was a very infamous Bronco chase where he was in the backseat of his friend, or maybe it was his Bronco, his friend's Bronco, in the backseat of a Bronco. His friend was driving. And this would really, truly only ever happen for a celebrity. This would not happen for anyone else. If it was anyone else, the police would have like laid down those spiky things that would blow out the tires on a car. Because it was OJ, again, I'm going to paint the picture, but it's to help you understand what a sense of entitlement this guy had, but it was also because there was all of these other factors that loaned itself to him continuing to develop this sense of entitlement. Anyone else that was evading the police, they would lay down the spiky things, they would blow out the tires, they would throw that guy onto the ground, and they would take him into custody. Not for OJ. For OJ, they cleared out the freeway that they were on, that they were driving on. The police they had a row of police cars hanging back behind the Bronco, giving them space, while the friend was actually on the phone with the police talking only about OJ. And I want you to understand what was going in behind the veil that led to all of this, okay? Now, after the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson, at that time Nicole Brown again, it blew up. And the attention was not necessarily on OJ as he felt it should have been. It was on Nicole Brown. And he didn't like that. He had to make this all about him. So this whole thing that was going on with the Bronco chase was actually his effort, and it paid off, but it was his effort to draw the attention back to him. It made him very uncomfortable that here, she's dead. And even as a dead woman, she's starting to get more attention as me. No. That triggered, again, this response in OJ where he needed to have the attention. That was what was going on behind the scenes, behind the veil, energetically with OJ Simpson, with this entire thing with the Bronco chase. He wanted attention. He wanted to make sure that the world was going to be watching. And in LA, when there's a chase, those helicopters are really, really good at tracking the chase. And even more so if it's going to be attention for a celebrity. And there was all of these negotiations going on. And this is, again, just going off of my memory because I don't research the topics that I actually look into. But this is just going off of my memory at that time, which was these negotiations that his friend was saying, OJ thinks everyone's going to think that he's guilty. And it was just all childishness. It was just all pure child's play. OJ wanted attention. That was all it actually was. And it was negotiated that actually if he came back to the place of his residence, the police would take him into custody. But again, this was done in a way that would never happen for any regular person else. He was allowed to come back to the home. I don't even think they took him into custody in front of all of the cameras. I think he was this is what it was. I think he was actually allowed to turn himself into the police station. So there was not even like a public arrest that was even done. Again, because the juice, the celebrity that he was, used a special treatment, continuing to have that special treatment. Okay. Let's see what else I have here. Okay, now he actually loved the trial because he was getting a lot of attention from the trial. The attorneys, now what was actually shown to me, if you were wondering, he had the so-called like dream team. He had like, I think 5 different attorneys. What was actually shown to me about the attorneys was there was a number of things going on. That first of all, yes, all of them had their own kind of specialty. And that is why they were part of this so-called dream team. But what was also going on was they had to keep him on a very, very short leash because he wanted attention. And he could go off if he felt like he wasn't getting enough attention, and they had to keep him on a very, very, very short leash. And that in addition to all of those attorneys having their own specialty in terms of like the law and as it related to the trial, they also had their own specialty in the way that they related to OJ, and in the fact that they were making sure to give him lots of ample attention behind the scenes. Whereas if, let's say, 2 or 3 of the attorneys were actually working on the case in the office, they always had to make sure that there was somebody that was going to be available to go like down to the jailhouse and give OJ the proper level of attention that he actually needed. They really needed to butter him up. They needed to juice him up. They needed to give him an insane amount of attention to make sure that he was actually going to behave in the courthouse, because they very much understood, the attorneys very much understood that he was, even if they never asked him if he had done it, and even if they never put him in the position where he had to say he hadn't done it, the way that it actually goes down when a person is killed, especially if it's a woman, I think it's like 98% of the time, or it's something like ridiculous like that, it's someone that they know. And who is the most logical conclusion for who they know? It's a previous person that they have been romantically involved in. It's an ex-husband, it's an ex-boyfriend, it's an ex-lover. But the actual percentage of women that are just randomly killed is bizarrely low. Now, through all the years of police detection, through all the years of the FBI profiling, this is very, very well known. They have the actual statistics on it. People are not really randomly killed. They're killed by an ex something. And now you have a case where there was all of this ample evidence that, first of all, during the duration of their marriage, he was actually physically abusive to her. Who is the most likely person that would have actually done it? So the attorneys very much knew that he was guilty. Let's not deceive ourselves into believing that they thought that he was actually innocent. Okay, now, he was acquitted, which we're not going to go into the actual acquittal, because that's not energetically what is like important to the relationship between OJ and Nicole. But he was actually acquitted. And what was also shown to me is, if you want further examples of his actual arrogance, just look at the fact that after he was acquitted and he was a free man, he was out there on the golf course, I think every fucking day playing golf. So all of his protestations that I will find who did this. No, OJ, you had no intention of finding who was going to do it, because he was the one that had done it. So there was no need to go looking for this supposed boogeyman that had actually done the murders. The murders were committed by him. But in his inherent sense of arrogance, he just went back to playing golf. He was a free man. He cared not for any of it any longer. Now, what was also shown to me was that Nicole, her soul is long the fuck gone. She has moved on. Now, she, first of all, this particular murder and the circumstance of this incarnation of being Nicole Brown Simpson had basically ensured that this incarnation was going to be her last. It was also shown to me that she had had a string of messy lives prior to this one. So that way, when she actually got involved with OJ, it felt very, very familiar to her, because this was a soul energy that she was actually used to working with, and this was a soul energy that she was actually used to experiencing as well. So when on a strictly three-dimensional level she had actually met him, it felt very, very comfortable and it felt very familiar to her. So she has definitely moved on. But what was shown to me was that right after she crossed out of her body, she literally did this. She like threw up her hands, and as if to say, well, of course it was OJ who did it. Of course, it's just, to her it was the most obvious thing. And then she just shook her head in disbelief, because she had known that he was going to do it. I think there's actually even recordings of her saying that he was going to kill her one day. Evidence, y'all, clear as day evidence. So she she was not surprised. She knew he was going to do it. So it came as no surprise. She threw up her hands, just shook her head in disbelief. Her soul went on. And that what was also shown to me was that she was actually basically a simple and unfussy woman. She just wanted to live her life and be left alone after him, but that was not meant to be. Now, what did also strike me as kind of interesting was that Ron has stuck around. So first of all, he was sitting in the courthouse every single day watching the trial. And he has continued to stick around. Now, his death was a huge blow to his family, in particular his father. They were really, really close. And Ron does not want to be reincarnated yet. He does not want to be reborn. He is specifically waiting for his father to cross over so his father can see him on a very, very pure and unfiltered soul level, and that he can spend time with his father after his father's crossing. He actually wants to be the one that's going to be at his father's side when his father crosses right out of his body. I'm getting chills when I'm saying this. And I'm not used to wearing a microphone. I keep touching it. I hope it's not messing with the audio. But he actually wants to be the one to greet his father when his father crosses out of his body. And he wants to spend a lot of time with his father once his father is on the other side. He has spent a lot of time with his father this whole time even. He has sat with his father in the car when his father is driving alone, and his father talks to him without having the understanding or awareness that his father is actually talking to him. But he does talk to him as if Ron is there, and he is there. But these two actually had a really, really beautiful soul contract and soul attachment and soul just a soul, like soul to soul. These two were like very, very beautiful kindred spirits that were very, very connected through all of their previous incarnations together. They were also very, very positive previous incarnations together. And as I've kind of like talked about in my other videos, the more lifetimes you have had with somebody and the more positive lifetimes that you have had, the chance of you coming into any particular incarnation with them, the chance of it being a positive one is going to continue to be positive as well, because you have less negative, heavy, dense karma that you need to work out between the two of you. So you can come into another life with somebody and you can actually end up being like supportive elements that help the other person along in their soul's mission in any particular incarnation. Conversely, just like if you've had any number of bad, I don't like good, bad, because they're like very generic kind of words. But if you have had any number of particular incarnations that were unhealthy, in which you have a lot of karma that you actually have to work out, the chance of coming into any incarnation with them again and having that same level of unhealthiness play out is very, very high, because you have all of those previous incarnations where you accumulated energy that needs to be worked out between the two of you. But these two actually have really had in all their previous incarnations very, very beautiful, healthy, loving relationships in every possible combination you can imagine, you know, mother, father, sister, brother, but they specifically have had a lot of incarnations as brothers, and very, very close brothers, and very, very helpful brothers, where they have helped one another evolve on a soul level. So yes, his father does talk to him, not understanding that he is actually talking with his son, but Ron is there in the passenger seat, just being there, holding space for his father. And even though his father doesn't know that he is there, he feels him. So that is all I have for you guys for O.J. Simpson and Nicole Brown Simpson. As always, I hope that you guys have found this video to be interesting and informative and thought-provoking. And please take what resonates and leave the rest behind. And until next time, stay in the high vibration.